Today on the 1012 softball show, myself, Eric, and Lea are talking about Big 12 softball, because of course we are. We're going to break down, should Oklahoma State be a host this season? Iowa State's rise the last 2 weeks, along with Utah and Baylor's. We're getting some resurgency from both of those teams, plus Eric's latest bracketology, and Baylor head coach Glenn Moore and Utah senior Kaylah Nelsen join the show for two absolutely fantastic interviews coming up on the 1012 softball show.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Starting April 4th, everything is on sale at Sephora. That's your favorite makeup, skincare, hair care, and fragrances on sale. The Sephora Savings Event is almost here. Save on brands like Rare Beauty, Youth to the People, Day, Glossier, and more. Only at Sephora and Sephora at Kohl's. Limitations apply. Must be a beauty insider. See terms at Sephora.com for complete details.
Welcome to the 1012, the podcast that covers all 16 teams in the Big 12 Conference. We are the flagship show of the 1012 Network. Find every show on the network at 1012network.com. That's TEN, the number 12, the word network. And of course, we are partners with Sports Social, Europe's biggest sports podcast network. I'm your host, Phillip Slavin. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday. You know it's Thursday, which means on Thursdays, we talk softballs, and we is myself and my two absolutely magnanimous co-hosts that are here every week. He is the voice of UCF softball. Hell, he is one of the voices of college softball, the In the Circle podcast. If you're not listening and you love softball, what are you doing? Don't miss it. You can put it up to 3 times speed if you want. My wife listens to books at 2 times speed, and I think it sounds like she's listening to chipmunks, and I'm like, how do you have a normal conversation? Anyway, I digress. He is Eric Lopez.
What an introduction. It's good to be back after a week off and see my good friend Lea there, who I know missed me last week. I know she did.
Last week, Lea was earning her title as the trash talk queen of the 1012 Network. Of course, she is also the mother of Cycloneers, the most famous Iowa State softball alum. Even guests of the show from other teams like Baylor head coach Glenn Moore, who's joining us later, loves Lea Nelson. She is, what are you, like, are you do we get to call you the face of Cyclone Nation?
No.
Cyclone Fanatic. And, I think does that sum it up?
Oh my, whatever. It feels good to be, to have the squad back together. I mean, last week was fun, but Eric, I'm glad that you're, in a good mood and, wanting to join us again.
I just can't. I don't know. You did a heck of a job convincing Jenna Becerra to double team me there. That was good.
There was no convincing. She was all in. She was the one who was initiating it.
Oh, I know. She was triggering it. I know. That's, you know.
She came locked, loaded, and primed and ready to go. But it is nice to have the 3 best friends that anyone could have together again to talk some Big 12 softball. As I mentioned, we actually have 2 guests on the show today. An absolutely loaded episode. Baylor head coach Glenn Moore is going to join us. Fantastic interview about the struggles for Baylor softball this season. Injuries. That is the key word. Injuries, and how his team is getting through this season and struggling with that. Speaking of tough seasons, we're also going to have Utah senior Kaylah Nelsen on the show. Absolutely a fun interview. She is such a fun guest. Again, having tough conversations with coaches and players when teams are struggling, but she is just such a positive personality. And I got to ask a really fun question for her that is a follow-up to a fun question that Eric got to ask on his Big 12 preview on In the Circle. So you don't want to miss that one.
This might be the most anticipated interview I have in this show just because based on, and I won't give it away, but based on my interview with her before in Big 12 Media Days, yeah, there's a follow-up there that I've been looking forward to hearing about. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. And Lea, we did name. So listen, I literally 2 interviews. I name drop Eric on one of them, and I name drop Lea on the other.
That's a squad. We are tight.
That's
here.
a first. That's a first. Usually I get one or the other, but to get both, that's that was good. That was impressive. Lea, I'm thinking more and more about this Lea Nelson Trash Talk Award for the 1012 network that I think we should try and find a way to do. But the problem I'm having with this, because I always ask during every interview, who's the biggest trash talker on your team, is how do we decide who would get this award? Who do we poll? Right? Because it's going to be up to like the teams and coaches are all going to say their own player. In theory, they're going to. Like, do we poll coaches? Do we poll players? Do we send it out to a bunch of people and just say like, hey, vote on this and whoever, and then we narrow it. Like this may be a next year thing where we work through the process this year on how to give out the Lea Nelson Trash Talk Award. And of course we'll name it after you.
Thank you. Wow. I'm so proud that that's an award named after me.
I've even got a photo. So we're going to have the trophy. I think will actually be you. And I found a perfect photo for it.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Graduation photos. Oh yeah. Look, internet. The internet is undefeated. It never forgets, ever. Okay, let's talk a little Big 12 softball. We're already 5 minutes in, so I figure at some point we should actually talk softball. Eric, I want to go straight to you. Got your latest bracketology up on before Tuesday and Wednesday's games. Wednesday games going on right now, Oklahoma State and Arizona State, and a non-conference game. So I want to kind of go through your bracketology. And discuss. Now, I'm going to mention, I also looked at Softball America. Our good friend Brady Vernon, friend of the pod, also posted their first bracketology in season today. And there are some differentiations between yours and his. And I think at some point I would really like to get you both on an episode and let's have a bracketology debate. Nothing vicious, nothing like combative. Just it's interesting to have two different perspectives.
You better be on my side
stuff.
for that one, Lea. You better be on that one.
Oh, don't. Yes, Eric. I will be on your side for that one.
All right.
If you get an entourage, I got to have Brady have an entourage, and I don't know who he would bring with him. Maybe Tara Henry would join. I don't know. We'll have to figure it out. But Eric, I do want to walk through yours. You've got 6 Big 12 teams in. BYU is your one of your last 4 in. No major surprise here as far as the Big 12 teams who made it. Obviously, Arizona, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Arizona State, UCF, and BYU. Now, obviously, BYU dropped a horrendous game midweek against Utah Valley at home. That's a quad 4 loss on a resume that, as we've talked about, is not the most impressive. BYU still has plenty of opportunities. They've got a great series this weekend. We'll talk about against Iowa State coming up. Big one for both of those teams. Let's start there. If you were to fill this out today, would you still have BYU as one of your last 4 in?
Oh, yeah, that was not good. When I got back from calling baseball and I saw that score, I was like, please tell me that's inaccurate. And it was not. And remember, it's the second year in a row that Utah Valley's beaten them, too. That's the wild thing about it. It's the second year in a row. And you can make the argument it kept them out last year, and it might keep them out this year. I will still have them in, but they might be literally the last team in right now. That's not a great position to be in. When you're them with their non-conference schedule, which I did write about on the D1 softball, and that's certainly a concern. You look at this weekend, they got Iowa State, then they host UCF. Really, these next 2 weeks could determine their season, whether they have a shot to be an at-large team or they may have to maybe get the automatic bid. The offense isn't as at the level that it was last year. Obviously, they lost a lot of personnel, graduation, and of course, Agbayani transferring to Oklahoma. Certainly hurt. I really thought, normally they just kind of reload offensively, and they're still pretty good, but they're not at the level they used to be. Their pitching's actually been pretty good with Korth. It let them down against Utah Valley and defensively. I think they are still in right now, but they're certainly a very, very shaky team. And could be, they're going to have to win. I think the UCF series going to have to win this Iowa State series. They still got Texas Tech at home later in the year. They might want to need a game there too. So they got a lot of work to do for Gordon Eakin and BYU.
Yeah, 36 in the RPI as of today. So definitely not out of it. You really want to be a top 40 team to feel remotely confident or comfortable that you can get in as an at-large team. And of course, there's plenty of softball left to play, plenty of opportunities, but this goes back to you can't schedule 20 quad 4 games in non-conference. They've got, that's their second quad 4 loss based off of things right now. I hate math. What's 16 minus, so 13, 14. That's the 15th quad 4 game they've played so far. That's just too many. That's just too many quad 4 opponents. I'm sorry. BYU has got to do better. They just do. I like it. Find a way. Find a way to do better. One of the biggest differences between yours and Brady's that I noticed, you still have Oklahoma State as a host. You have them as the number 15 overall seed with Nebraska and Missouri, ironically 2 teams they face this season, and Marist in the regional. Brady doesn't. He's got them at Arkansas. I personally lean towards Brady's side here because I know I'm
shocker. You've become Mr. Skeptical.
I've become the pessimist poke, okay? And I'm sorry.
Ooh, I like that. I like
Eric,
that.
I lean toward yours.
Thank you, Lee. I always liked you better.
Mm-hmm.
Pessimist Poke podcast coming soon. It's just Phillip complaining about what Oklahoma State's doing to him mentally and emotionally now. I look at this team and the way they've been playing. And look, I think last weekend was disappointing. You had opportunities against Georgia and play awful defensively. You have a bad game against Georgia Tech. You go 2-2 in a weekend where you really wanted to go 3-1. Huge news that Riley Crandall is back in the circle. It had been an injury issue. We didn't know why she hadn't been appearing. She was kind of shaky in her first games back in the circle, but I think it's huge for Oklahoma State that she is back and hopefully getting healthy and will continue to improve. This is just not like, just like last week. Jenna saying like, Oklahoma State, this is what they always do. This is what they always do. This is what I expect them to do. I've watched it, but this does not look like a normal Oklahoma State team. Like that, I've watched enough of them. That's like, it doesn't look like those teams. Like they don't. And so I don't know how, based off where they are right now at 19 in the RPI, and you really want to be top 18 based off history to get a hosting spot. Yeah, they've got plenty of opportunities, but I look at this week right now, game at Arizona State that they're in the middle of right now in the 3-game series at Arizona. I just have a hard time saying Oklahoma State's not going to lose too many games to be sitting there at the end of the regular season and be in a good spot to host, where it's not going to be them versus 4 or 5 other teams potentially for a hosting spot. And I just don't trust the committee to not side with an SEC team or somebody else in that situation.
Well, first of all, Leah, call Kenny Gajewski, let him know that Phillip thinks the season's done. It's over.
Yep.
Like, just
he doesn't listen to the show. Thank goodness.
I already texted him. I texted him and I DM'd him on Twitter. So
there you go. Let me just say this: you're not what you said about Oklahoma State on the field. You're not wrong. In fact, Kenny Gajewski kind of opened up to the local media this week, talking about how he feels this has been a unique journey, that they haven't played to their potential. He's even talked about he's back at third base now because he felt the team missed his emotion there. I thought it's been very interesting there. Everything you said is correct. However, for 2 things, I put him as a 15 seed, which means it's not like they're like, ooh, they're definitely going to host. That's bubble range. Their resume is still good. Even if it has not been pretty and consistent, they have a top 5 non-conference schedule. They have 8 top 50 wins. Their resume is still good enough to host compared to some of the other teams in that mix. Like, I think their resume is better than Georgia even. And I think that's very important. Yes, Georgia just beat Oklahoma State. I get it. But the committee, that's a small data point that the committee only looks at if the resumes are close enough. I don't think Georgia's resume is as good as Oklahoma State. They haven't played as the schedule that Oak State has. Mississippi State is being hurt by their non-conference schedule. It's in the hundreds. So that's why I have them 15. This week, though, is huge. This week is going to tell the story because you've got Arizona State, as we're talking about, in a non-conference game, which is, I don't know if both coaches ever could have imagined how big this game is when they scheduled this, because it's a monster game for both sides, to the point where we're getting Ruby Malin, Kenzie Brown on the broadcast. Heck, Darren Sutton's calling the game. You know, it's a big deal when they're not letting the Arizona State students call it. Hallelujah. All right? Hallelujah. But then you go to Arizona. To me, this is the week. If Oklahoma State, I'll give you this, Phillip, if they struggle this week, let's say they go 1-3 or lose the Arizona series, you're right. They're on the outside looking in at that point. But if they win the Arizona series, if they go 3-1 this week, something like that, that's going to skyrocket them right back up there. So to me, this is the week. This is the week where we're going to learn about Oklahoma State facing Arizona State and Arizona on the road. You know how Kenny's teams usually rise to the occasion when their backs are against the wall. And right now, this is a week where it's the backs against the wall. Now, they're going to need some quality innings out of Riley Crandall. They're going to need to be more consistent offensively. That's the thing that's been perplexing. Their offense has been hit and miss. Very uncharacteristic. And their defense was a debacle against Georgia last week, as you saw, 5 errors. Like, what is that? So I get it. And like I said, this is the week that's going to tell the big story, whether they can host or not. Keep in mind, they got Oklahoma coming up at Devon Park. They also got to go to UCF. So they still got a lot of games they could be top 16. But you're right. This is the week. If they do poorly this week, they probably will not be hosting in my bracket next week.
I mean, the rest of the way, you mentioned, they've got a midweek against Oklahoma next week. That one's on Wednesday on ESPN2. They got a midweek against Texas coming up towards the end of April. But you look at the rest of the Big 12 schedule, and it feels very trappy. You gotta go through this stretch of the 4 games in Georgia, at Arizona State, 3 games at Arizona, Oklahoma, and then you get Iowa State.
Woohoo!
Oklahoma State sworn softball thorn in the side nemesis in all sports. You got a Wichita State at home before a 3-game series in Orlando. You play a midweek against Texas, then you have to go to Kansas, North Texas, followed by a series against Utah in the season. It's a Utah team that's been better. It's a UCF team that's up for big games and down for the others. Like, I would say, hey, you know what? If they go 2-2 this week, they're okay. They have plenty of opportunities. But we talk about this a lot. This is not a Big 12 anymore. There's so much parity. It's hard to sweep. I don't look at this Oklahoma State team and say, like, they're going to sweep all the teams they're supposed to beat the rest of the way and not drop a couple games that are going to disappoint you in a quad 3 situation. And so I think there's so much pressure right now on them to improve so quickly this weekend against Oklahoma that I'm just worried. I don't know that I think they've dropped some games that they shouldn't have that are going to cost them down the stretch, like that, where the offense was inconsistent, like the 1-0 loss to Auburn, or the games this past weekend against Georgia, or Georgia Tech, even dropping the game against Baylor. They're so inconsistent this year. We're talking about this week. There's no way they're going to go to the rest of the schedule and not drop a few games as well that I think are going to really hurt the resume.
Well, and the thing that's got to worry you too, remember they literally did not get to play those 2 Houston games.
Yep.
That could be to come back to haunt them. The big concern from Oklahoma State is, what if Texas Tech goes on a roll here? Let's say wins the Big 12. They may jump Oklahoma State into that hosting spot too. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. They're hosting. I'm not saying there's not reason to be concerned. I'm just saying the reason I have them hosting right now is, at this moment, that resume is a top 16 resume. Will it be a week from now? It may not, depending on how they do this week. But time will tell.
If not, we will not talk about Oklahoma State next week, other than potentially having Coach Gajewski on the show.
Get ready for Netflix's gripping new medical drama, Pulse. Set in a cutting-edge Miami trauma center, third-year resident Dr. Danny Sims is unexpectedly thrust into a promotion when beloved chief resident Dr. Xander Phillips gets suspended. Then, with the emotional and physical stakes at their highest, a storm will push the hospital and its residents to their limits. Witness how life can change in a heartbeat when you're operating under pressure. Watch Pulse, only on Netflix.
I do want to talk about 2 teams that seem to be kind of maybe trending in the right direction. Again, we have Kaylah Nelsen coming on. We talk about this with her a little bit, but Utah's won back-to-back Big 12 series now. We can quibble over the fact that it's Kansas and Houston, but this is a Utah team that's very young. They've been struggling this season. Baylor taking a game from Oklahoma State, almost taking that series, then taking the series from UCF. I look at these 2 different teams right now, and we'll throw Iowa State in the mix because, again, Iowa State, 2 straight Big 12 series. You got 3 teams that we were kind of like, well, all right, we counted them out. Now they've gotten into Big 12 play and they're starting to show progress. Yes, again, parity in the Big 12. There's wins for everybody. It's really hard to sweep teams unless you got Nyjah Kennedy out there. How do we feel about these 3 teams that seem to be somewhat on the rise in Baylor, Utah, and Iowa State? I don't want to say like rank them, but I kind of feel like I buy what's happening with Iowa State and their development. I think I buy what's happening with Utah and theirs. Baylor's figuring some things out because we talked about Lily Walker with Glenn Moore. She was not supposed to be a come in and play 7 innings pitcher. She was supposed to be what she was at Duke and play middle reliever and close games out. Now she's playing 14.1 innings in a 3-game weekend. She's kind of getting more comfortable with that situation. How would you say, like, turnaround you trust the most, less so?
Well, I'm gonna jump in here because this is where Leah and I have a kumbaya moment here. So I wanted to beat her to the punch. I'm going Iowa State here, number 1.
Yep,
Agreed.
that was
Agreed.
duh.
Well, and here's the thing. Duh. Very good. Yes. Duh. But here's the serious thing. I know their RPI right now is like low 60s, I believe, 61, 60.
Yeah.
63.
Mm-hmm.
They are 1 spot behind Kansas.
But think about this. You got BYU at home this weekend, okay? Top 40 team.
Yep.
They still got to play Oklahoma State, which, as you know very well, they've had their number. They've had success against Oklahoma State for whatever the reason. They've had success there. You got Baylor at home. My point is, Iowa State, if they can get on a roll and win some series here, if they can win this BYU series, they could start slowly crawling up and get in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. They have a top 30 schedule strength. Jake Pinkerton's playing the difficult schedule. Now, they have some bad quad 4 losses. We don't need to go over that, how they're slow start in the non-conference. It was funny for those that may not be aware, because I know people were hitting me up like, "Are you and Lee on good terms after the sweep period?" Which,
we actually.
And in fairness, I did ignore her for like 24 hours, more because I was in shock, more so than angry. I was just in shock what I saw. But you and I talked about this, Leah.
Yeah.
And Iowa State in conference play, and I think it's a credit to Coach Pinkerton, and you played for him. So this is why I wanted to mention it, because if you say it, people are like, well, of course you played for him. Of course you're going to say the nice things about him. But I think he does a masterful job of game planning for opponents in conference play. Because when you're in conference, and you can speak to this, Leah, you can just focus on one team. So you can dissect their strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's why Iowa State has always had some success in the Big 12. We're like, wow, I can't believe they beat Oklahoma State. Last week, they beat Arizona State. They beat Kenzie Brown, which is the irony. Like, I wasn't shocked that they won the Arizona State series. I was shocked which games they won, which was the Kenzie Brown games. But they, as a staff, have always done a good job of game planning. Now, they might get beat because the other team maybe has more better personnel, but they are not going to beat themselves as far as game planning wise. Whereas as you're playing in a non-conference tournament, it's hard to just game plan because you're playing 4 or 5 teams. But that's why Iowa State, their next win in the Big 12 will match the most wins they've had in Big 12 play in the Pinkerton era.
It's crazy.
They have a chance to get double-digit wins and be the most successful Big 12 team ever. Now, it's a lot to say, but it's in front of them. But that, to me, Leah, I want your thoughts here now. That's why I wanted to jump in, because I didn't want people, obviously, you've played for them, and you can speak to from an internal standpoint. But I think that's why I do think Iowa State's a dangerous team here moving forward. And if they can take care of business at home against BYU this weekend, they can slowly – they still got a home and home with Iowa. They got to play Baylor. They got Kansas. If they can win this series against BYU, let's say sweep Iowa, take a game from Oklahoma State, I think they got a shot to get themselves into the conversation for the NCAA tournament.
That's, first of all, it's so exciting to be able to have this conversation, because a couple episodes back, like, no shot. Again, you mentioned like the quad 4 losses, but Coach Pink knows what he's doing. Like, and I'm not just saying that because I played for him. Like, he knows what he's doing, and you nailed it on the head, Eric. It is so hard to prepare for 3 different teams, a bajillion different pitchers. You're trying to watch film on everyone. You don't know who you're going to see. And then going to, one team, 3 or 4 pitchers that you can really nail. And then that gives Coach Pink the opportunity to be able to match certain hitters with certain pitchers. And that's why you kind of see a different change in the lineups. Like Iowa State doesn't have the same lineup every single time, which is also really awesome because they've got a deep bench. They have people that they can pick and choose that can come in and do different things. And we kind of texted about this over the weekend where there was so much versatility in the offense. Like there were people that you didn't hear about at all at the beginning of the season that were making a difference in the Arizona State game. So this is a whole different Iowa State team than I've seen in a long time. And I'm excited for them. They're doing well. And I think it's kind of like a little bit of them being naive to Big 12, which is a good thing. Like, I don't want anyone to take that poorly, but it's like these young girls, like, they're going in with so much confidence, and the transition from high school to college ball is insane, and they're doing so well. And they've beat these good teams and they've competed with these great teams where they now believe that they can play and compete with all of these teams in the Big 12.
The UCF weekend was the game changer.
Right.
In all fair, I know you and I have not talked publicly about that series. For obvious
the way
reasons.
the way you said that was so funny. It's like we've been in massive beef.
That's the cliffhanger. Well, we had to tease the audience and the cliffhangers there, but for this ratings. But I remember talking to Coach Pinkerton leading up to that series. They were close in like the Ole Miss game, a couple of them. They just couldn't close the door. And remember, they're a young team. The UCF game was the first time where they were able to close the game out. And when you get that feeling, oh wow, we can close this game out. That team left Orlando, a completely different team,
right.
Much more confidence, and they carried that over to the Arizona State series. I know things didn't go well in game 2. They got blown out. They put it behind them, started brand new in game 3, and beat a good Arizona State team. That's a very good Arizona State team they beat. 2 out of 3. And I'm telling you, if they beat BYU here, BYU's got to go to their place for the first time ever, which Pink's probably going to be thrilled because he's had to go to Provo,
right.
I think, multiple times.
Right.
If Iowa State can win, and you never know because you got to caution, they're young. It's a young roster, so it doesn't mean it's going to happen because this is the problem with the Big 12 this year. It's up and down because of the youth in the league. But if they can win this, I'm telling you, he's got a chance to make a push here to get in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. We'll see, but he's got a good nucleus he's building with Clements, who I think is a stud at shortstop. She's the next Sammy Williams of this program. She's
so unreal. Like, what an incredible player. The confidence she has is so insane. Like, when she gets up to bat, I'm like, oh, she's getting on base. And you don't see that about a whole lot of freshmen, which is pretty exciting. And this Iowa State team is just different because in years past, they'll close the door on a team and then you think, oh, they're treading upwards. And then they get in a slump again and they're losing to teams they shouldn't be losing to. This hasn't, I know it's only been a couple weeks since the UCF game, but this hasn't happened with this Iowa State team. They are still closing the door on these good teams. And I just continue to hope, I hope that they continue to be able to do that.
Allen's a talent, and they got Mallet, and they figured out that pitching by committee, just give different matchups, could make the difference.
They're figuring it out. And I think that's exactly what Utah and Baylor are doing. There's more games. They're figuring out what's working. It might not be what they thought was going to work at the beginning of the season, but it's trial and error, and that's college softball. You play a bajillion games, and by midseason, you're going to kind of see what's working.
So Iowa State BYU this weekend, big series for both teams. Both teams trying to get themselves on the right side of the bubble. Let's look at the rest of the weekend, what we got going on. We've talked about Oklahoma State, Arizona. I think that's the series of the weekend. It's a big one. That one being out in Arizona, Oklahoma State for 3 games, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's a big series for both teams. Oklahoma State, we've already talked about, really needs to find a way to get a series win here. Because I the way Texas Tech is playing, and having already beaten Oklahoma State, I know Texas Tech and Arizona are still going to play. But the way Texas Tech's playing, the way Nigel's pitching, to me, this Arizona-Oklahoma State series, the loser of this series is eliminated from the race.
Definitely Oklahoma State is if they lose the series. It's done.
Yes.
At that point, it's an Arizona-Texas Tech race. Yeah, I agree.
And even if, but like you look at the standings right now, Texas Tech has 1 loss in conference play. Like Arizona's already got 4. Like it's a lot of ground.
No, you're right. 100%
It's a lot of ground.
Right. You're 100%
So
right.
the loser is even at Arizona.
Yeah.
If they drop 2 more games, you've got 6 losses in conference play. The loser of this series to me is eliminated from the Big 12 race.
I agree with that. I agree.
And
with
if it's Arizona who loses, I don't like giving out awards trophies before the season's done, but you could probably go ahead and start putting some double T's on that trophy for the regular season at least. So huge series there in Arizona. Utah, Texas Tech. I like what Utah's been doing. It's been a fun turnaround. This is not the team you want to have to face next when you're still trying to get things figured out. At this point, Texas Tech's the only team sweeping Big 12 teams. It's getting, again, everyone else is dropping games. Arizona dropped a game to BYU, to Arizona State. Like, Arizona's dropping games. Texas Tech's not. I kind of hate this weekend for Utah because it feels like they've been turning things around. This is not the opponent you want to go up against right now. I think Texas Tech's probably just going to sweep Utah again, and they're just going to have to lick their wounds and bounce back as best as they can for the following week.
Well, Utah's growing up. That's what they're growing up. The young talent's growing. They're getting experience. I think they'll give Texas Tech a game. They got a shot to take a game. It's probably going to be the non-Naisha start, in fairness. But
So Saturday,
but they got a shot. I wouldn't dismiss it completely because Texas Tech, I watched them against even Kansas. Even on the last game of the series, there was a 0-0 game for a long time there with Katie Brooks matching Naisha pitch for pitch up until I think the fifth inning. So Texas Tech's offense sometimes kind of doesn't show up for a few innings. So I wouldn't put it as a lock to be a sweep. I still would obviously pick Texas Tech for all the reasons you just mentioned in that regard. By the way, Arizona, this is the thing about Oklahoma State. We're going to find out about Oklahoma State's pitching against that Arizona offense. More specifically. And one thing that now I've been the positive Oklahoma State person, right, Leah? I have been the optimist, unlike the Oklahoma State alum over here who has been a little pessimistic and pretty much
technically just a fan, not an alum. My degree is from a different school in the state of Oklahoma.
Oh, I did not know. Well, we're breaking news. Hey, look at Leah's face. She's shocked.
Oh, do you guys not know this?
Wait a minute.
I hold on. It gets better. I always love people find this out because it's always this reaction. Would you like to guess which school I actually graduated from?
Did you go to Oklahoma? Are you being serious?
Time I stepped foot into the football stadium while there was for graduation because I had to.
Wait, this is such a shock. I feel lied to.
Wow.
Wait a minute. I'm so confused. We don't have to talk about this now, but what?
Well, every the number of people who've been like, wait, what? It's fun. This is always, we'll take this off air. Yeah. Speaking of Oklahoma, UCF is headed to Norman for 3 games, and based off the way UCF has been playing the last few weeks, Eric, I expect them to beat Oklahoma twice and lose to St. Thomas.
I mean, I'll believe anything at this rate. Mother Nature may not even allow a game to be played. We'll see. It looks pretty bad in Norman. You would know about that. That one you can verify there. But,
I mean, look, I'm in Arkansas, and I promise you, it is supposed to rain and thunderstorm all the way through till Sunday. Yeah, I would not be shocked if they don't play a game this weekend. Maybe Saturday, but I would not be shocked if the whole weekend is just canceled. The way this stuff is going. Baylor headed to Houston for a 3-game series. I think I kind of like Baylor here. The way they've seemed to maybe have been turning things around. Lily Walker's been really good for them. Houston still just doesn't have much as far as in the circle, and the offense that was really potent seems to be slowing down quite a bit. It's a 2-1 series either way. I might lean Baylor in this one this weekend, even in Houston, just the way Houston's kind of Houston going in the opposite direction of Utah, Iowa State, and Baylor. It's almost like they peaked too soon.
I agree. I would go Baylor. I think Lily Walker's the key. If Lily Walker's been pitching pretty well, remember, it beat Oklahoma State, has beaten UCF over the last couple of weeks. If she pitches to her ability like she's been pitching the last few weeks, she'll shut down Houston. If she struggles or they have to go through the other pitchers, then Houston might have a shot and win it with their bats and win an ugly, kind of a wacky little series there. So, but I'm going to go with Baylor to win a close one, 2-1.
I would have to agree. You had Coach Moore on this episode too, and I feel like you've been pretty lucky with who you're picking, and and how they're winning. So
I would just like to point out that Iowa State's turnaround has come the 2 weeks
exactly.
that I've had an Iowa State guest on
I'll
the
give
show.
it to you.
So, if you're listening, you may want to request to get more guests on the podcast throughout the rest of the season, but not next week because you're playing Oklahoma State, and I'm not going to allow that. Kansas traveling out to Tempe to take on Arizona State. I'm not picking sweeps much outside of Texas Tech. It's hard to pick a sweep here, but Arizona State's going to win this series. I just don't. Kansas gets some good stuff in the circle. Katie Brooks has been solid, but it's been up and down, and the offense is still Kansas's offense, which is just not enough. And I just have a hard time here picking Kansas. I just think this. I hate it. I really do. I hate it. I hate it so much. I wish this wasn't happening this season, because last season, the way it went, I really thought maybe, but I'm picking Arizona State.
I'm curious how Arizona State comes out after the Oklahoma State game. The wonder is how does Arizona State look in the non-Kenzie Brown start? That could be the game that Kansas just beat Missouri recently. So
yep.
They're capable of kind of biting you there. So we'll see how that goes.
It was almost a great night because UCF beats Florida, Kansas beats Missouri, and Oklahoma State gives up 5 errors and a loss.
Yeah,
to
nice
Georgia.
job.
Yeah, that's on you.
Yeah, trifecta there.
It's because I haven't had an OSU guest on in weeks. So, Gajewski, I'm gonna have you on next week. That's what we're gonna do. That's what we're trying to do.
Let me bring up this. The one thing I do worry about from an Oklahoma State perspective is how is the pitching without Ruby? You got Ruby Malin going against Arizona. She's familiar pitch against Arizona. Number 2, how is the Oklahoma State pitchers not named Ruby Malin going to pitch in that park at Hillebrand, which is a hitter's park, against that offense? Those are the concerns I would have from an Oklahoma State perspective. Devin Netz, cheap plug. She'll be on the guest on the In the Circle podcast there. Talk a little Arizona softball. So we got a lot of Big 12 guests this week, huh? Between our 2 shows.
Ooh,
how about that?
Hey, that's a good week. That's a good week of softball talk on your top softball podcast.
I might have to lift the ban on Lea to be appearing on the circle. I banned her after the Iowa State UCF series, but we might open it.
Oh, I wonder do I want it? Do I want to accept an invitation for OSU UCF week? I don't know now. I wouldn't want to damage our friendship. So, okay. This has been fun. We've got 2 great guests, as I mentioned, coming up. Kaylah Nelsen of Utah, Coach Glenn Moore from Baylor. Absolutely fantastic interviews. Of course, I will have the videos for both of those if you just want to watch those posted on the 1012 podcast YouTube channel. We post quite a bit there. I've got a 1012 overtime episode with our good friends Sam and Bobby from Scott and Holman podcast to talk Houston men's and women's basketball because they have a new coach for the women's basketball team. We'll be back on Monday for our last Monday episode for a little while. We're going to cut back. It's time. Let's cut back. But we got lots of softball. So enjoy the interviews. Enjoy the softball. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Lea. We'll talk to you guys again. Big 12 softball, 10-12 softball show next week.
TaxAct knows small business owners can sometimes use a little help with their taxes. That's why TaxAct has Expert Assist, a team of live tax experts ready to answer any questions you may have. Think of them as your own personal sidekick. Not like one of those funny talking animal sidekicks, more like the super smart nerding out on tax code and business casual attire sidekick, but just as helpful and lovable. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
We keep working our way down the list of Big 12 coaches in our effort to get every single one on the show before the season is over. Very excited to check another name off the list today by having head coach of the Baylor Bears, Glenn Moore, join the 10-12 again. Coach, welcome back.
Always good to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to get to pick your brain and talk about both the Bears and college softball as a whole. You've been doing this for a long time, had a lot of success. And at this point, I was talking with I think Coach Eakin, and talking about like there's some of the coaches have some Big 12 group chats where you guys are contacted. No. It was not Eakin. I forget now who it was. I'm sorry. There's so many different coaches we've talked to. Do you find yourself often chatting with some of the other Big 12 coaches about just the game in general and the conference and how your seasons are going?
Yeah, a little bit. Not as much during the season. We certainly connect on the recruiting trail all the time, and think that's a sense of therapy for us. We get to complain. I think we complain too much sometimes, but we do point out the positives and the opportunity to influence some lives and try to bring each other full circle back to that point quite often as the game changes for us old folks a lot more than we want it to, and certainly more rapidly than we want to.
I don't want to make any comments about how long you've been doing this or age or anything, but do you feel like you've taken on any sort of like sage advisor role to some of the newer new members of the conference, coaches in the Big 12, and just newer head coaches in general?
Yeah, I actually enjoy that part of it. Relied on a few whenever I was young that helped me out a great deal, and have contemplated even writing a book a few times to help young coaches understand that what they're going through, they're not the only ones, and sharing that a little bit to try to encourage them. But the bottom line is we have a great opportunity to change a lot of lives that not every profession gives you. And sometimes we put too much emphasis on the bottom line, which is wins or losses, which is also important. But, I just enjoy sharing some whatever little wisdom I have from experience and from failure, and doing a few things right here and there. I like sharing that.
That's awesome. Well, I think there's camaraderie amongst all sports when there comes to coaching. I think when it comes to each individual school, you see a lot of that where, coaches within different universities are going to have communication with each other and form bonds. But softball, I don't know if it's just a matter of because it doesn't get the attention that others do, that because it's a little bit of feels like a little bit of a tighter knit community there than say a men's basketball or a football where there's so many people involved, there's so much going on, or there's so many schools that are out there playing. Softball feels like this really, really close knit community amongst even all the schools at different levels.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think probably when in regards to say a football or basketball, the pressure to win is so enormous, and it is with our sport as well. It certainly has grown to garnering that kind of respect, and that those expectations are certainly there. But I think there's still that old school feel of being able to identify with what each other is going through, and I think there's certain areas that we've moved into the same realm as some of the other sports that I'm not really that crazy about. Certainly when it comes to the recruiting stuff and what's legal, what's not legal, and pushing the envelopes in those areas. Commitments, for example, used to be sacred. You didn't mess with commitments, and now until they're signed, and even some situations after they're signed, there's a lot of moving toward the tampering side of it that I'm not happy with, and wish we could go back to the old school way of doing things. But overall, I think there is a more of a family sense in our sport. And can't speak for every sport, but I know there's still that camaraderie within our sport. You see that at the convention, you see that on recruiting trails and hanging out and making phone calls, text messaging, and things like that. I think it's still very prevalent.
Now, you guys have not yet faced one of the three new schools to join the conference this year in Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah. You do have Arizona State on the schedule later this season. No Arizona, no Utah. But of course, you've got BYU and UCF are still new to this conference. Looking at this new 11-team Big 12, what are your thoughts on kind of where the Big 12 is and these new additions these last 2 years now that we're kind of at least partway into this first season of this new membership?
Well, I think the word comes to mind is parity. I think you got a lot of tradition. You got the Arizona's tradition, the national championships, Arizona State, Utah. We haven't played and won't play this year unless it's in the Big 12 tournament, or Arizona, but we've played them throughout our time here at Baylor. In fact, we played Utah last year on our way out to play BYU, so very familiar with that program as well. And I just think there's a lot more parity. I think you're going to see teams beat each other up, and it's going to make for some great softball. It's a good good, strong softball conference, and it's only going to get better.
I mean, that's kind of been the word. I'm in this college softball Discord channel, and the word when it comes to the Big 12 this season is just chaos. Because every time you think you know where a team is or who a team is or what's going to happen, we get an upset here and we get what we perceive as an upset there. I mean, it is parity is a great word for it. It's been a very interesting Big 12 season because while there's some things we kind of expected coming into the year that have landed kind of where we thought, this really does feel like a conference that has more depth than ever, but is very up and down just because of there is a ton of youth in this Big 12 conference this year. Like obviously there's seniors and names we know, but you look at young Utah and young UCF and young Arizona State. And I mean, across this whole conference, there's just there's, I don't want to call it a youth movement, but almost like it's a reload year and we're building toward, some really peak softball being played. What are your thoughts kind of on what you've seen in the conference so far from who all you've played and scouted and your thoughts on where this conference kind of stands within college softball as a whole?
Yeah, I think I think you nailed it. There's a lot of youth, room to grow. The problem is with the transfer portal, you don't know what one team's going to look like from one year to the next. And pitching's so important as we're experiencing right now. We went into this year scheduled for this year with 7 arms and 4 that we thought were legitimate. We're down to really 1 arm that can compete for us. And she was one we brought into being a more of a closer, middle relief, and Lily Walker. But, a year from now, I could have 3 more pitchers that make a big difference. So you can change what you see now is no guarantee of what you're going to see a year from now. So the youth, while it's good, could change drastically over the course of the year. And I think that the Big 12 is only going to get better. I think it's it's a very popular conference. We're located in a good region of the U.S. and there's a lot of talent from the states that we're recruiting from. Although the recruiting at Power Fours are now going heavily into the portal, but there's a reason for athletes to want to come play in these schools that are in these areas and in the Big 12 region. So it's a fun conference. There's going to be, I think in the future, it's going to be it is now hard to sweep weekends. You're going to, play a lot more closer games, extra inning games. It's just a fun conference to be in. The crowds are good. The attendance is good. It's a popular sport.
Yeah, sport that continues to grow in popularity. This conference is so much fun. I think we use the word chaos for coaches and teams. It's not a great word. For fans of the sport, it's fun to watch because you don't know what's going to happen each week, and you get so many different results. It's a ton of fun. I love that you mentioned your pitching because that segues perfectly into one of the questions I have for you. I mean, we saw this past weekend. You mentioned Lily Walker transferred in from Duke this past offseason. Pitched 2 full games and another basically 14.1 innings for you guys this past weekend. Talk about her development because I mean she did seem to struggle a little out of the start of the season, and she's really become this really important arm for you. Talk about her improvement throughout this season and what is the state of your pitching core?
Yeah, well, we'd be in really bad shape without Lily. She's been a gift. Our intentions were to use her the way Duke used her. And as a closer, one time through the lineup, I think lefty off speed, mix of speeds, very intelligent, mature, wisdom-filled pitcher that brings a lot to our bullpen. But our intentions were to have Daria Orm healthy. She's been 2 years removed from her surgery. Casey West is also medically redshirting. We've lost a couple to the transfer portal. So what we had intended on having would be a bullpen with a lot of maturity and a lot of age, a lot of skill to grow 2 of our freshmen in Sadie Ross and Lexi Warnicki and give them an opportunity to get some touch and go innings in and protect them a little bit without letting them get beat up. And unfortunately, because of the state of things and injuries and Dari not getting completely healthy, Daria Orm, that is, we've had to rely on Lily to pitch the bulk of our innings. She gives us a chance to win every game that she's in. But as you saw, we started her 3 games in a row this past weekend because we're in that situation right now. The 2 freshmen that were pitching, Lily Lexi Warnicki and Sadie Ross both are coming off injuries. Sadie was released within a week prior to our opening tournament. Lexi was released right before Christmas, but had not had enough opportunity to really get her game back, and has still felt pain throughout the season. So we're relying on two pitchers that aren't fully back from injury, and Lily Walker, who we're asking to carry the load as a starter. Pitched her first collegiate complete game this year earlier in the year, and we had two complete games out of her this past weekend. So she's grown. Coach Newman's done a great job of her hitting it off together. They work well together. Changes a lot of speeds and keeps a lot of hitters out on their front foot. And we've got a great defense. I've said all along, possibly the best defense I've ever put on the field, and we've really had to rely on them to keep us in games because Lily's not a strikeout pitcher. So she's going to get a lot of ground balls, a lot of missed hits, and she's going to squelch big innings, but she's not a strikeout pitcher. So we need that defense behind her, and it's been pretty consistent. We just have put too much pressure on our offense to score runs and haven't done enough of that. But yeah, we're in a difficult position pitching wise. We've got to rectify that in the off season, but this is what we've got right now. You can't change mid course, and we're got to run with what we have right now.
I mean, it reminds me to some extent kind of Arizona State last season. You have this team that on paper going into the year has the talent to compete, make it into regionals, and then the injury bug is, it feels like once it bites one, it just starts biting all over the place, and it spreads. And that certainly seems like it's been the case for your pitching staff, where, again, on paper heading into the season looked like one of the best in the Big 12, if not one of the best in the country. And now the depth has just been killed by injuries and players trying to heal. And so, like, how is your team kind of getting through what's been, I'll use the word, a little bit of a disappointing season, giving expectations coming into the year?
Yeah, from a win-loss standpoint, it's a disappointing season, but camaraderie, confidence-wise, this team still believes that they can do something unexpected. We'll always have that hope, even if it goes down to the Big 12 tournament. Losing a couple of big teams out of the Big 12, and we talked about parity early on, leaves the Big 12 tournament open for the team that gets hot. Whereas in the past few years, Oklahoma and even Texas as of late, it's hard to get by those two. And certainly we have a couple of big teams that are performing well in Oklahoma State and Texas Tech and Arizona. There's some teams that are performing well, but you don't have to play all those teams in the tournament. So I think there's going to always be hope with this team. But I've said many times, there's not a team I've ever put in a uniform here at Baylor, and this is my 25th year here, that I've loved any more than this team and love to go to practice with. And you want it for them. But reality is that this game is built around the kid in the circle. And there's some things that you preach your whole life, control the controllables. There's certain things that you can't control. And it's no use in beating a dead horse, if you will, and telling your team you just got to play better whenever they're playing their hearts out and they're practicing their hearts out. And you just have had some bad luck. And our hope now is that our two freshman pitchers that have been hurt and asked to do more than we had hoped that they could do can catch fire at some point in time and help Lily out. And if they do, then we've got a chance to do something down the stretch here. But we're running out of time. We know that. But it's not going to change our approach to how we practice and how we play and how we affect each other's lives. And quality of life in this sport as a coach, as a player, is very important to me. And I want them to be a little bit uncomfortable whenever they're not living up to expectations, but understanding the reason why you're not living up to expectations in a sport that's centered around what's in the circle is very, very important. And we get that, and this team gets that. But leadership is good. We played well this past weekend. We're not going to blow anybody away because we're going to give up too much. But we played well this past weekend against a very good and very hot Central Florida team. We just got to build off of that and continue to believe and compete every inning.
Yeah, it's a great series win for your team there in Waco, getting 2 of 3 from UCF. Feels like you hope from the outside, and I'm sure inside, that's a sign of maybe a turning point for this team, that they're figuring things out. I mean, when you look at what happened this weekend, you look at your team through practice through the week, Where do you feel like you've seen the biggest improvement so far in the last few weeks as you continue to build towards trying to get to the postseason?
Well, the offensive production has been a struggle ever since the first couple of weekends. I mean, we go to A&M the first weekend and play them, put up a 7 spot, and don't have the pitching. That's when the light bulb really came on. We didn't have the pitching to hold on to that. I think it was 7-1 in the 6th inning, and we end up losing the game 10-7. But we knew we had the offense there. But as you start putting the pressure on yourself to score 6, 7, 8 runs a game to win games, then you start scoring 2 and 3. We also played a very tough schedule. Palm Springs, come back. We play Oklahoma twice here. Play Texas. So we faced some 70-mile-an-hour plus pitchers over and over and over. And I think you lose a little bit of confidence whenever you're, not swinging the bat exceptionally well against quality All-American type pitching. Then the mountain starts to grow a little bit. So I think we're at a position, to answer your question, we're at a position where we're understanding that the purpose of scheduling that was so that our offense would be prepared when it mattered most. That's what we've done traditionally here. I didn't put together schedules to build stats, to look good on paper. I put together schedules that would prepare us for the end of the season, for the final stretch of the Big 12, for postseason. And this is a little more dire situation than we have been in the past because of our record. Where RPI are not good at all right now. So you need to win some of those games, and traditionally we have. But we are in a position offensively to start exploding a little bit and scoring some more runs and pushing runs across the plate. We need to get Leah Cram back in our lineup. She got hit a couple weeks ago in the hand and has been out. I think she's out for 2 more weeks, and she was a 400-plus hitter for us that was making a big difference. Taria Coleman is starting to come back around after a concussion. Shaylin Govan, 2-time All-American, can get it done. We've got the tools. We're starting to see that offense that we dreamt of show up a little bit here and there, glimpses of it, and hopefully down the stretch we'll be able to put up those 6, 7, and 8 spots.
Yeah, again, injuries. I mean, you look at the lineup again on paper. Govan, we know how good she is. Leah Cran's been a bright spot. Getting in Taria Coleman, she's been fantastic. And just it's hard when you look at it and say there's nothing you can do about injuries. You can't coach injuries better. You've got the roster you've got, and I think you guys have been working through it as best you can. But it's tough from a coaching sense. Like, how do you communicate that to your team of like, look, we can't fix injuries. We can't change the situation. Like, we have to work through it. That just feels like such a hard thing to feel like this thing and then this thing and then this thing and then this thing, and they just pile up. How do you mentally work through with your team to kind of get past that?
So, Phillip, I don't think there's one set answer to that question. I think it's keeping a pulse on your team and knowing when you need to push the buttons, when apathy is setting in with your team, then you need to push some buttons. Reading your team, knowing that your team's in a good place. We had a great practice yesterday. The girls were locked into film session. We had a different type of practice where we watched film with a group, and then we went out and brought in another group. We did this 3 times, and they were locked in. So you get a read for your team and where they are psychologically. If they're in a good place and you're giving them what they need to be successful, then there's hope. But if they start checking out on you and they're going through the motions and practices, and it's a challenge practice-wise. Every day cannot be monotonous. You can't do the same thing over and over and over and expect a different result. That's the definition of insanity, right? So we do a lot of planning to try to make it a little more competitive, change up practice routines, and even take time off if we feel we need them. So I don't know that there's a bottled answer for that. I just think maybe some of what I've gained as a coach from a wisdom standpoint has led me to be able to read teams a little bit better and give them what they need to be the best they can be. At least I feel that way. There was no coaching methods class that ever taught us how to deal with the lack of having 1, 2, and 3 pitchers, in boots or a cast, or not pitching for you or not pitching well for you, and trying to figure out what to do. When you're at a private school that costs $80,000 a year, you're not going to have 8 people in your bullpen because you can't spend all your scholarships on your bullpen. So that's part of it. But there is no coaching method that tells you how to do that. You just got to read your team and hopefully get some feedback from those around you. Your supporting staff is crucial in these situations. And I'm still very optimistic that whatever the outcome of this season, it's not going to be a wasted season, and these kids are going to fight hard all the way to the end. I'm very, very pleased with our leadership here. We have 11 seniors on this team. I've never had that many. I want to fight hard for them to experience whatever success they can. We're certainly not throwing in the towel. I haven't read that from any of them that they are.
That's awesome. I mean, that's what you want to hear. I think that's a sign of great culture. I think that's a sign of recruiting, players who are great leaders and great people. And I think that's a credit to you and your staff as well. So that's what you want to hear, is that despite the frustrations and what's gone wrong, no one's focused on that. You're focused on continuing to achieve a goal you set, even if it's further away than you hoped it would be. Coach, as always, you are a fantastic interview. It's great to be able to get your thoughts and insights. Before we let you go, a few things I do want to ask you about real quickly. First of all, I do have to tell you, your best friend Lea Nelson wanted me to tell you that she and a number of other Iowa State alums will be there in Ames for your series at the end of the year. So if you hear anyone yelling at you from the stands, just know she's a coming, and I think she's going to be very excited to see you.
Leah's possibly my favorite opposition I've ever coached against. She's something else, and I'll be looking forward to see her. Stayed around for her senior day recognition when everyone was in the bus, which just because of our banter back and forth that we'd had throughout the years. And I certainly love her, and we'll be looking forward to seeing her.
That's fantastic. Okay, number one, if you were playing today, what would be your walk-up song?
Oh, I'd probably have some either maybe some Bon Jovi, Tom Petty. I don't know if I can come up with a song right now. Memory Lane from Old Dominion. How about that? I'll do that one.
Okay, that's a good choice. Good choice. Peanut butter and jelly. What is your jelly of choice?
Grape jelly.
Okay, a traditional name. Yeah. Okay. I know we've talked in the past that sometimes you it's been a struggle to get in non-conference some of the teams you'd like to come to Waco. If there's one team you could get to agree to come for a non-conference game in Waco, who would it be?
Let's go with Notre Dame. I know that may be off the cuff, but the Baptists versus the Catholics. How about that?
All right, we'll see what we can do.
All right.
What is your favorite Baylor uniform for your team?
I think I like the anthracite, a little bit of gold trim. I think I'm going to go with the anthracite. I liked our white unis before they started wearing white socks and white belt, but it just it needed some definition. So I'm going to go with the anthracite.
I like that. Okay. This year's team, who is let's say who is this year's Lea Nelson? Who's your biggest trash talker?
Ashlyn Walkendorf,
okay.
Without a doubt. My right fielder, 9-hole hitter. She's the one I want, not just trash talking. I have to calm her down a little bit, but she's the one I want with me in the dark alley whenever I need somebody to protect me. She will run through a wall for me. So I have to go with Ashlyn Walkendorf.
That's awesome. That's a great answer. Coach, as always, it is an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for your time. Good luck to you and your girls for the rest of the season. I hope to talk to you again soon.
Always fun, Phillip. We appreciate you.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And And the winner by knockout is Patterday! Patterday, bring it on!
After back-to-back Big 12 series wins, it was time for us to go back to Utah. So very excited to have on the show today from Utah, Kaylah Nelsen. Kaylah, welcome to the 1012.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you. Look, we had Coach Hogan before the season. She was a fantastic interview. I've been wanting to get a Utah player on, especially on these back-to-back great weekends out of your team. I want to start with you in particular. This is your senior season. You were named to the Big 12 preseason team. You lead your team in batting average. You're top 10 in the Big 12 in hits and doubles. Like it seems like you are having a season personally kind of up to what externally was expected of you. How do you feel like you are doing this season? Do you feel like you're kind of living up to your expectations for yourself?
Yeah. This year has been a little bit of a challenge for me. Last year I feel like I didn't have many coaches and teams doing a lot of film on me, and this year I feel like they are. So it's definitely been a challenge in the box a little bit, trying to figure out some areas that they're throwing me that I may not love, and just trying to get in there and like battle that out, and just understanding like what balls I can hit hard and what pitches I can't, and just trying to dial in on that zone. That's probably been a challenge for me this year, but I will say like I definitely am like very proud of myself, my team, my coaching staff for just being able to help me kind of get to where I want to be this season. But yeah, I mean, I'm proud of myself, and I'm just super excited, and hopefully it keeps going up. But yeah, I'm stoked.
That's awesome. That kind of leads me to a question of, obviously we all kind of have an idea of what some of our weaknesses is in things. Sometimes we don't. And so how much does your team, your program kind of work on self-scouting? As you mentioned, you're seeing other programs put more focus and emphasis on you and look for what ways that they can, strike you out, get you out, so to eliminate you from the game. How much self-scouting do you do? What does you and the coaching staff look at to say, okay, these are ways that we can continue to improve, even if it's not something that opposing teams have quite figured out?
Yeah, so our coaching staff does a really good job with that. Obviously, the hitters work a lot more with Coach Court. She's our hitting coach. She's awesome. But a lot of things that we do, we have like our own personal charts. And like, honestly, after a lot of our games every weekend, we'll go in and we'll go back on Synergy and we'll look at our own film and we'll kind of plot point all the pitches they're throwing at us, whether they were changeups or not, where the pitch is. Did we get a hit on that pitch, and kind of like our counts, which is really beneficial for like, at least for me per se, because a lot of times I'll be like, no, I swear that was a strike, and then I'll look back and I'm like, that was not a strike. And they are repetitively doing this same movement where they're going to try to go like this pitch and then maybe low, and I'm not sometimes realizing every one of those patterns. So it's good to have like that realization, but a lot of times we sit there, we do our own film to try to look for those patterns by ourselves. And then we'll sit back and then we'll talk to Coach Court, and she'll kind of give us that feedback on kind of what we can do better with our pitch selection, what's our cold zones, which means obviously the pitches that we're not very fond of or don't love, and then our hot zones that we know we can hit that ball hard. So we kind of do like film by ourselves, but then also personal film with her, just so like she might pick up things that I obviously don't see about myself. But I would say like for at least our team and like our awareness is pretty good. For the most part, I think, because we do a lot, like in the fall, we did a lot of training, with like 108 and with a lot of people, and basically got to know and understand the ways our bodies work. Like for me, I'm more of a grounded hitter. I'm not someone that's very like tall. So like being able to understand, okay, since I'm a grounded hitter, like I do these things really well, but I might struggle on these things, and like taking what I do really good at, being a grounded hitter, and then improving and getting better that way. So like we did a lot of body, a lot of movement stuff, and like understanding ourselves, our own swings. And then on top of that, then we have the other side where we talk about the film aspect and like what pitches we should be hitting, what pitches we shouldn't be hitting. So I feel like preparedness wise, it's been super helpful this year.
Okay, that's as someone who has not played softball, this is all very interesting for me to learn, and so I'm sure there's listeners who
Yeah.
are like, "We already know all this," and I'm like, but I don't." So some of these interviews are for the listeners of the show, and some of these listeners answers questions are just for me personally. You have been fantastic this season, and there's certainly been some high points for everyone on the roster, but it's hard to say this hasn't been a disappointing year so far with the record. A very difficult non-conference. You guys have had some really close games. What is the vibe in the locker room right now with this team, given how this season has kind of gone to this point?
Yeah, honestly, I think the vibes right now are pretty good, actually. We're pretty loose. The one thing about our team is we thrive when we're happy and when we're like messing around the locker room, blasting our music. Like, I feel like it sets the tone for us. We play our best when we're loose, and that's just a fact. That's just how it's always been in Utah softball. I know from previous years, we've kind of had, some slow starts to get there. Kind of like this year. I know it's been pretty rough the beginning, pretty hard. I think our team's just trying to find our groove. That was our big struggle. Is just like we have so many new girls, so many freshmen, understanding what their role is, understanding what our roles are, and I think it's just something that's so difficult when you have so many new people. And that was kind of like the struggle that we knew we were going to have to try to face. Just at least like that preseason, that was kind of our time to learn and try to like pick up the pieces and figure out what's going on. But I feel right now that we're in a great place. We just won a couple of series, so that's always great. That always kind of makes us want to go here. But I definitely think that it's a lot more looser. I think a lot of people are starting to understand what their roles are. I think that we're starting to understand what type of a team we are and how we can execute runs and how we play our defense well. And I think we're starting to get that figured out. So I'm honestly really excited to see what's good the rest of the season's going to look like, But I think honestly the locker room's been great. It's probably my favorite part, to be honest. So yeah.
Okay, so what you said when you got your music playing, what's the in locker room jams like? What's on the
Honestly,
spot? What's on the playlist?
we have a lot of Hawaiians on our team. I think we have like 4, maybe 5. But so there's a lot of reggae, which is nice, super chill. Obviously, there's always like you got your hip hop, old school R&B, rap. I'm a country girl, so when we throw in some country, that kind of makes me get ready for games. But the team, they're like, country's so sad, it's sad music, so they always throw on some like reggae, which is cool too. But honestly, we kind of listen to all the genres.
Okay, that's good. Wait, what kind of country do you? What are your go-tos?
So honestly, I love old school country and new. Like I'm not very like my dad listens to like Alan Jackson or like Toby Keith and like all those old guys like Johnny Cash, but also too I love the newer ones. Like I love Morgan Wallen, I love Luke Combs, like all of those singers. And then you have like the Jason Aldean, the Randy Houser, all of those. So like I like all of the country, to be honest.
Okay, nice diverse catalog, very good. As you mentioned, this is a very young roster. There's a lot of new faces, a lot of freshmen, a lot of sophomores. As a senior, this being your last year, what kind of legacy do you feel like you're leaving for this program in your final year to try and help this young roster develop and continue to grow and get Utah softball kind of back where you would expect it to be?
Yeah, I think the mark I want to leave is just like understanding that I can make an impact in like people's lives. Obviously, like having great stats, hitting the ball, being a good player, like all those things are awesome. But like I think for me, like no one's gonna call me 10 years down the line and be like, oh, Kayla Nelson, she hit this. Like they're gonna call me back and be like, I appreciate the type of person you were, like the type of culture that you left, like just who you are as a person. And like that honestly means way more to me than any stat, than any hit or anything. So I feel like for me, like I just want to be able to impact like people's lives. Like my dad always told me like growing up that I might be like the closest thing to a Bible that anybody's seen. Like being able to like, be like a light for people and like represent God's glory is like the biggest part for me. So I just feel like the culture I want to leave here is just understanding like, I just want to be a good person. I want other people to feel like they're going to make difference in other people's lives and new people that come into the program. But also as well as like, I'm not a very talkative person. Sometimes on the field, I'm not very loud. I'm pretty monotone, pretty mellow, but that's okay too. Like you can always lead by example. And that's like a huge thing for me is I might not be super vocal, but I do try to take pride in my character and like the leader I am on the field and by the things I do. So.
Okay. Again, we've talked about this turnaround. You've won 2 straight Big 12 series over Kansas and Utah, Kansas and Houston. Sorry, red logos that are similar. What do you think has led to this kind of turnaround for you guys? What do you think it is that has helped your team kind of find ways to win these last 2 series in the Big 12?
Yeah, I think so. One of the biggest things, I'm not super big on the pitching side. They've turned theirs around, but from like the hitting defensive perspective, I feel like a lot of us were kind of playing very tight. Like we were kind of nervous to swing at that pitch. We're kind of like just playing very like just a little bit nervous. Like we didn't really go out there and was like destroy the ball, like we were being a little bit too picky. Like I just feel like we were a little bit on our heels. And at some point, like right after that Arizona tournament, we were like, guys, we literally like, there is nothing to absolutely lose. And that's what I love about being like an underdog is that like everybody else that plays us has everything to lose except us. Like, let's just go out there and literally have fun. Like take our hacks, like make the play that you're nervous to make, like just let loose and have like, just be free, And I feel like that was the conversation we had. And I feel like all of us were like, you know what, you're right. Like playing on our heels isn't going to do anything for us. Like it's showing, obviously. So let's just go out there and do something different. If we fail, then at least we're failing towards a positive, like that's okay. Like being able to fail, like Coach Court always tells us, but like failing is the answers to the test, like being able to fail and learn from that is a good thing. And I think we finally were like understanding, okay, you know what, that is true, and like trying something different. And I feel like once we kind of like, just like I told you, let loose, turn the music on the locker room and just go up there and do our thing, it like actually helped so much. So I feel like that's like the big part of our turnaround.
And that's awesome. Look, I always say you can be told things, you can study things. Sometimes the best way to learn is through experience, right? As a child, you can be told something's hot, but until you touch the stove, you're never quite understanding what hot actually is. And so
absolutely
losing isn't fun at all, but sometimes there can be more to learn from losing than there is from winning. And you take those lessons learned when things are hard and apply them moving forward, and that will show growth, right? And I think this team really is starting to show some growth from the beginning of the season to now, to see them in games where they have to fight their way back or hold on to leads. I think that's big progress for this team from where it was just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Want to shout out your teammate, Kennedy Proctor, who was named Big 12 Player of the Week this week. Tell me about Kennedy. What's it like playing with her? What is it about? What is her role to you in this team?
Yeah, no, she's awesome. I think like with Kennedy, I remember like talking to her in preseason and like I was able to kind of see like her potential. I feel like she was pretty hidden. Not a lot of girls in our team were kind of like realizing what she has, but I noticed it like right off the bat. I'm like, this girl has so much potential. Like I was trying to like even pick her brain because she's like not super like loud. Like she's outgoing, but she doesn't really talk a lot about like her softball knowledge. And I was like, just kind of like knock on your brain and like think about what you're like, just understand your thoughts and what you're thinking when you're going up to bat. And then she tells me all these things. I'm like, holy crap. Like she's got like a good IQ. Like she's understanding and like I just feel like her maturity, like when she's in the box is actually pretty high compared to like maybe even when I was a freshman, it was really impressive. But honestly, like I knew that she was going to be an impact for our team right off the bat, like in the preseason. And it's just super exciting to see her like go out and do her thing and like ball out. And I think that she's understanding and she knows what her role is now. I feel like then it was like she was trying to figure it out. We talked about it a little bit and now she's like pursuing it, and I'm like so proud of her to see that. Like that's such a big thing for her to be able to like come on the field and make a huge impact year one. Like it is so hard to be a starter, as you probably know, freshman year, but she's doing it. And honestly, I'm so proud of her. Like her mindset in the box, just like her demeanor, like she's just like so focused and dialed in. And like the one thing I love about Kennedy is she like doesn't overthink a lot about her at bats or her defense, like whatever she's doing. Like she makes an error, she's like, okay. And then she comes up the next at bat and she's like, boom, crushed to center field, like, and I think that that's so important that a lot of people like struggle with is like the mental side of the aspect and of the game, like understanding that like this, as soon as you're thinking here, like it's hard to get the results that you want in the box, where she just kind of like lets it go. All right. And then she comes in and like does her thing. So honestly, it's been like so awesome to see her like thrive. And I mean, I'm just really, really proud of her.
Yeah, it's awesome. The mental side of the game is so huge, and it's one of the hardest things. It's a hard thing to teach. I don't know how to teach it. It's a hard thing to learn. Again, experience more oftentimes than not than just having it explained to you. So to see her come in with that as a freshman is really, really big for this team.
Yeah.
This is your senior season. Last year playing softball, unless you decide to play some in the pro. Has that started to sink in for you a little bit as we get later and later into the season?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of weird. My parents are like, "Oh, we just booked our flights for your senior weekend," and everybody, my boyfriend's family and my aunts, and they're like, "We're booking the flight for your senior season. Do you have your cap and gowns? We take pictures." I'm like, "Holy crap! It's literally actually happening." It's like mixed feelings about it, Like as much as I'm excited for like life in the next step, it's like also nerve wracking because I'm like, this is all I've done since I was a little girl. Like it's, mixed feelings for sure. But yeah, it's definitely been the back of my mind.
Yeah, look, just maximize it. Like make the most of it. Sit and enjoy every moment as best you can.
Yeah.
Soon you'll be working every day and you'll be like, man, I wish I was back playing softball in college.
I'm like, no.
You've spent your entire career until this year in the Pac-12. Your freshman year was at Oregon State, then you moved to or transferred to Utah. You've been here since. Now you're in the Big 12. Utah making the move over to the conference with Arizona and Arizona State. What's been that experience been like going through a conference transition as a player? We talk about it as programs and stuff, and we as fans get excited, or in the case of some Utah fans, not so excited. But as a player who's used to doing one thing and switching over to another, what's this transition been like for you this year?
Yeah, it's been there's like definitely some really high highs. Like there's some great things about it. I think like one thing for me that I love is like getting to compete against different teams, seeing like different stadiums, like all that fun stuff. Obviously, I've already seen the UCLA's, the Washingtons. Like it's kind of cool to see like a different change, and also to be like one of the first people to ever play in a Pac-12 and in a Big 12 by like transitions, which is obviously kind of cool. I think another thing that like would be awesome is getting to win like the first Pac-12 tournament we've ever had, and then to be able to switch to the Big 12 and then be able to win that would be pretty cool. That'd be like the cherry on top. But yeah, like it definitely has some cool positives. Obviously, like it's a little weird. I always tell my dad, I'm like, why is UCLA playing Iowa? Like, where are they? Like they should be here. Like
In
it's a little
conference.
weird, like it's different for sure. Like obviously, like I chose the Pac-12 because in my opinion, it's the most competitive conference in the country. And obviously of your SEC, but Pac-12 is really strong. And then two, it's in the West Coast. My family lives in California, so my dream is to play in front of them. So it was a little hard with all that stuff and the travel. Like we're going to Texas Tech next weekend. My dad's like, that's a little far. Like I don't know if we can make that. So it has its positives. It has some negatives, but honestly, at the end of the day, like I think our team and I are excited. Like I think it's a cool change, and it's just getting to play all these new teams. Like I won't get to play Baylor this year, but I think it'd be cool to play them and see their stadium. Hopefully when I'm alumni, I get to go travel there, but also too, getting to have a series against our rival BYU, like that's going to be a lot of fun. That's going to be super hectic and, noisy and fun. So I feel like that's a cool change too, to be able to have like our rival and actually like beat them in a series, so it's been cool. Yeah. Good experience.
That's a great mindset about it. Yeah, look, Utah and UCF being in the same conference, Iowa and UCLA being in the same conference. Some of these things are never going to settle or make sense at all. Like that's never going to be like a thing you go, yeah, sure. That's just part of how things are now. Kayla, you've been absolutely awesome. We're going to wrap this up the same way we do with everybody with a few quick questions. So number one, I'm going to guess the answer might be something country, but what is your walk-up song this year?
So we have three. We have like a throwback. My first one is, okay, actually I wanted to change it, but my little sister like wanted me to keep it. So I'm like, I guess. So it's like a Snoop Dogg song from the West Coast. So I'm like, okay, I'll keep that. And then my other one is the Let's Groove Tonight. And then my third one is country, which is my favorite probably. It's called Welcome to the Show. And it's a good show, or it's a good song. I honestly love it. I wish I almost would have like switched that to my first day and I could hear it on my first day, because sometimes like we don't always get to the last, like since we just literally got like rained out the other weekend and we're still having snow, so sometimes I get to miss my favorite song. But yeah, if I could redo it, I'd probably do all country.
Okay. Peanut butter and jelly. What's your jelly of choice?
Oh my gosh, I actually hate jelly. I know it sounds crazy, but I literally, like, growing up, my mom would only make me like peanut butter sandwiches because I never liked jelly. So peanut butter.
Okay. No peanut butter and honey, no peanut butter and fluff, peanut butter and banana, just straight peanut butter.
Just straight peanut butter. I mean, sometimes
All
I'll
right.
have bananas, but mainly just peanut butter.
Okay. All right. That's a new one. I got to ask this. You were on the In the Circle podcast with our good friend Eric Lopez before the season. Fantastic interview. But you mentioned something about a boyfriend who you mentioned here, and maybe hopes for a ring at some point soon. You got any updates there that you want to share with us?
Yeah, so it's so funny. He actually watched the last podcast and was like, "Oh my gosh, you did not just put me on blast." It was so funny. And he's like, "Well, now I feel like I have to ask you like before the season ends, so when you get to see him, you could be like, I got it." But no, I told him like, don't rush it. Obviously, I feel pretty confident that it's gonna happen this year. Whether it's like summer to maybe December. Hopefully he hears that, and it's another push for him to hurry up. No, but yeah, like we're still talking about it. We're still pretty on board. I think like the biggest thing is like both of us understanding like what our goals are before the next move happens and everything. So that's kind of like what we're in conversation about, and things are lining up. Obviously it's God's timing, not ours. So but yeah, I mean, once I get it, I'll definitely have to shoot you guys both a DM or a text or something.
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please. Yeah, look, as you mentioned, conversation is key in any successful relationship. So it's good to have that. And plus, if the boyfriend's parents are coming out to your senior weekend, like that's not for, fourth date kind of stuff.
I'm basically in at this point. It's just a matter of when.
All right. Well, if we need to help you with applying any pressure, happy to do so. I'll get you the link for this when it's done. You just send it to him and be like, hey, you should just fast forward to the 22-minute mark and take a look.
I might have to.
Okay. Would you rather hit a walk-off home run to win a game or rob a walk-off home run at the wall?
Hit a walk-off home run. I see defense is cool and all, but hitting's definitely my game. Like that is my favorite. And I don't hit many home runs, so hitting a home run would just be like perfect.
Okay, very good. All right, last one. You mentioned you're not the most vocal on the field, neither is Kennedy. Who is the biggest trash talker on your team?
We actually just had this as a question this last weekend for our fans to guess. And it's my roommate next door, Siani Sakai. She is freaking hilarious, but it has to be her, hands down.
Okay. All right. So if we were to hand out a Ten12 Big 12 Trash Talker of the Year award, do you think she'd be a viable candidate for that?
100%.
Okay.
100%.
Okay. Our trash talk aficionado, Lea Nelson, who's an Iowa State alum, we'll get her. We'll figure out how to make this happen. Kayla, you have been awesome. This has been a great interview. Thank you so much for your time. Congrats again on the last 2 weekends. Good luck to the rest of the season in your senior year. And anything we can do to help you with the boyfriend, just let us know.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun. And as always, go Utes.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.